Hi, I'm Janet Gross. Welcome to Coping Today, a place where we talk about mental health and well-being. Today we're talking about fatherlessness, so prevalent in this country, and it can be so damaging to children and families. What happens when dad leaves or is never there or only there sometimes? The life that was meant to be built together can be fractured, and there's often lasting consequences. Dr. Roy Salgado, professor of counseling at the University of Holy Cross, joins us to talk about the seriousness of life without father. And that is serious.
It truly is. And not only is it serious for the individual who is growing up without a father in the home, but ultimately it ripples out into society as well. We find that a significant percentage of the American population today is growing up without a father in the home. Roughly 18% of the population is growing up without a father in the home. And different segments of the population, the numbers are much higher.
Right, I've heard like 40% of some.
40% in certain segments of the population, 70% in other segments of the population, and so the impact that that has on the individuals and then ultimately on society. With regard to the individual, just growing up with greater incidences of physical illness, of mental health issues, of loneliness, of conduct issues, and then having an inability to be able to integrate with authority figures. When there isn't a male authority figure in the home, it makes it difficult for young people, and males in particular, to identify and be able to work with authority figures outside of the home, coaches, teachers, law enforcement. And so it becomes a challenge when a child isn't introduced at a young age to a male authority figure, because it does look different than that of a female authority figure. And when you go out into the world and you are dealing with a police officer that statistically, for example, are higher males, there's more males as in law enforcement than females, then the interactions are different. And so because the individual doesn't quite know how to interact with a male because they didn't grow up interacting with males, the people around them were, the people of authority were female.
And there's their example of a female in authority, but without the other gender.
Right.
Okay,
and so the dynamic that plays out is different as these young people are growing up.
Yeah. And just the example. I mean, we all learn by example.
Right.
And if you don't have those thoughts or those connections, it
Right.
just it can last with you forever.
Absolutely. And boys and girls are in need of example from both a masculine figure and a feminine figure, a paternal figure and a maternal figure. And we have a significant percentage of the population not having influence from a paternal figure, then that helps that perhaps has an adverse impact on the individual who is growing up, not socializing with a very important part of society,
Yeah.
a masculine figure.
Yeah.
And not only that, but more intimately, not knowing 50% of who their biological history is. You know, you have a mother and you have a father who made you, and to not have a relationship with your father, with half of the person who was responsible, the people who were responsible to make you, then that psychologically leaves a hole, you know, a sense of abandonment, the insecurity that goes with that. Why am I not loved by the person who helped to create me? And all of these different things that an individual may struggle with as they're growing up and wondering about their father.
And I also got to think you learn from the dynamic between your mom and dad a lot.
Yes.
And if you don't have that you're learning, you know, a great example, you might be getting the example from TV.
Absolutely. You know, and to that point too, one of the interesting things that the studies that have shown over the course of the past 40 years, initially back in the 80s and 90s, there was a big move to say don't argue or have conflict in front of your children. We have found recently that there was an adverse impact to not having conflict in front of your children. It's important for children to see parents, for example, have disagreements, to see them have disagreements and find resolution and learn how to resolve it. And before, when parents were told in the 80s and 90s, fight behind closed doors, have disagreements behind closed doors, then children didn't grow up seeing that. And then when they were confronted with a conflict out in the world, they would break apart. They wouldn't know how to handle it. They wouldn't know how to resolve it. So now The idea is that if you're going to have a disagreement, if you have different points of view or perspectives, it's okay to have that conversation in front of your children, never being abusive, mind you. There's a difference.
Yeah.
Having those conversations and come to a resolution. So that way the child grows up seeing, wow, it's possible to have disagreements. It's possible to not see eye to eye. Even my mother and father don't see eye to eye 100%, yet they respectfully found resolution to any given conflict. And that helps an individual grow up and become a productive, competent person who will, at some point, find themselves with another human being who's in conflict, be it a teacher, a classmate, a sibling, a police officer, whomever that may be.
So they've had real life exampled in front of them.
Yes.
And they can go on to, yeah, okay, we disagree, but we still love each other.
Yes, and we move on, and we survive this incident, and we go on for another day.
All right, before we're going to take a break because we have a couple of really great guests coming up. The University of Holy Cross offers this service to help.
Yes, the University of Holy Cross for several years now, and the Maronites of Holy Cross have been offering free telemental health counseling services to any resident of Louisiana. So any resident of Louisiana who is struggling with any type of issue, be it depression, anxiety, any type of mental health issue, can just simply call the number on the screen, and the assistant will go ahead and triage that call to the clinical director, who will then assign a counselor and trainer to you, and you can get free telemental health services, any resident in the state of Louisiana.
Yeah, that's a great thing. Okay. Well, when we come back, we'll talk about the results of a recent study on fatherlessness. Stay with us.
Is it okay to call you Mom?
Of course you can.
Welcome back. Now we're joined by Dr. Brunel Elsie Jr., a counselor of education and supervision and an alum of the University of Holy Cross. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, I know you recently did a study on this, on fatherlessness.
Yes.
What did you learn?
So my study focused on African-American adolescent males who experience father absenteeism and how they navigate life with male authority figures. And the information kind of confirmed a lot of the research out there, but the biggest things that popped up to me was the whole feeling of mistrust and authority based on not having a father figure present. Through the research, we found that a lot of the individuals sometimes would purposely create conflict with authority figures because they lack that at home. You know, this is something I wanted, so I want to have this conflict with a male authority figure, a teacher, talk back, get in trouble so I can get that form of attention from a male figure that I should have been getting from home. Also, like situational effects at home. One participant shared how if his father would have been there, he wouldn't have been living with his abusive aunt.
Oh.
So I was forced to go live with my abusive aunt because my father wasn't there, and of course my mother before that had passed. So the only person I had was my father. He didn't want me and wasn't involved. So I was living with my aunt who abused me and his siblings. And he just happened to have female siblings. So he was the only male in the household. So then also in my research, he had to assume a role of the man of the house. But he had no figure of how to do that because he didn't have that role model growing up.
Wow. So you're like, I think this particular guy, he was like hit double.
Yes.
You know?
And like you said, he was in a clueless state. He was just learning every day of what to do, how I should do it. And then if he messed up, he had to figure out how to pick up the pieces. He didn't really go outside because his aunt didn't allow him to really navigate outside of home. So he's really confined to that home and just figuring out how to navigate life through those experiences of going to school, coming home, and doing what he has to do.
Something you said struck me, that he was looking for that conflict because it's something he didn't get with his father, which I think is very interesting because when you think of the male of the species, be it human beings or lion cubs or bear cubs, boys and fathers wrestle a lot, and there's that male energy that you kind of get out naturally, instinctively, and when you don't have that in the playful situation and learn how to kind of get yourself out of the situations, you seek it artificially, you seek it differently, and it sounds like that was something that was articulated in these participants, or at least in this participant, that they actively sought out something, perhaps in a maladaptive way, that would perhaps play itself out naturally in a more playful way between a father and son in particular.
Right, and I found that very kind of impersonal. Before I became a counselor, I was a teacher, and I found myself in conflict a lot of times with male students, and I had to kind of reflect and say, okay, think about where you were at this particular age, you know. Then also, this is how they know to show affection and their emotions, to be aggressive. And even through this study, these are some thoughts they may have had. And I just had to boil it down and say, okay, what is really going on? Okay, you're taking care of your younger siblings at home. You come to school, this is the only place you have to be a child, because at home, you are an adult. And that goes into, as they develop into young men, where we look at with like police officers and things, they're just doing what they know to do, protect themselves, protect their family. But from a police officer, oh, you're trying to be a man, you're trying to abuse authority, when in fact, they're just defending who they are and what they know to be and how they've been behaving throughout their life.
Wow. Okay, so when you run into, like what you said, you would look at a student, your student, through those eyes. I guess as a teacher, you might be, as a male teacher specifically, you might be the only reasonable example in their life that they see every day.
Yes, and I found
That's
that
a big
also
responsibility.
Yeah, it is, because a lot of, even now as a counselor, a lot of male students I'm dealing with now as a counselor in the high school, they're not used to being loved by a man positively. Even if their father is present, like I have one particular student, his father is semi-present, and it's like every time we attempt to help him, it's like, okay, you don't have to do that. You know, this is what I'm supposed to do. You know, I'm the man. I'm supposed to be able to take care of myself. And sometimes we have to just tell them, like, hey, you know, men have feelings. Men have to process things as well. Men need help, and it's okay to ask for help. And that's been an important journey for me as I developed through counselor education and the profession, is to advocate for those individuals who don't know how to ask for help, you know, and that's very important.
And that's an interesting point there as well, because when there is a father in the home, a father that's present, the father perhaps would, just through the interactions, communicate that it's okay to ask for help. I am here for you to provide and offer that help to the child, whether the child is 4 or 8 or 12 or 16, and as they grow up understanding, okay, there are times where it is okay for me to rely on someone else for help. When you don't have that experience and you think I am responsible for these things throughout my development, I go out into the world and someone's offering help. Well, what's your intention? What's that about? I'm a little apprehensive because I'm supposed to be doing this, because you don't have the experience of knowing it's okay to have help. I get it from my mother, I get it from my father, I get it from others.
Right, and it's often as if it's something you want from me. Oh, you giving me something? So what I have to do for you? And it's not a sense of, okay, you're doing something because you really care about me. No, you want something from me. So what do I owe you for doing this for me?
And that can lead to a lot of different things. Yeah.
Exactly.
So what, I mean, and I'm not asking you to solve the world's problems here, but just your opinion. You've done the study, you've talked to kids as students and as in your research subjects. What's the answer? I mean, you can't say, well, get a dad. That doesn't happen all the time.
The answer is education, you know, providing more culturally competent trainings and programmings for teachers, administrators, for law enforcement. Also providing more resources for single mothers, right? You know, single mothers are just navigating life on their own and how they see fit. And it's important for them to have the resources they need without, again, what do I have to give you in return, feeling, and just allowing the family to thrive and develop as they should.
You know, and I would add to that, that the male of the species, encouraging men, that when men do have children, the value of that and the importance of that and the purpose that a man can get in life, what great purpose you can have by parenting the children that you have fathered, and the graces that come with that. And I think that that's an important thing. I think we oftentimes neglect to educate men on the beauty that it is to be a father when you've been privileged and blessed enough to father children. And so to celebrate that and encourage that, you know, with the men in our society.
And I agree, that's something that has to be reiterated, because from historically within the African American community, that is something that has not been socially promoted, even back to slavery times where the father was taken away from his family and the mother was left with the children, and so it's something that has to be consistently appreciated by all entities, in fact, right? And also honored and acknowledged that this is an issue. Let's work towards solving this issue. Understand that each of us have a part in solving this issue.
And I would think that, like, if you have friends, if you're a male and you don't have a dad, but your friends do, maybe, if that person has enough of a heart to help you, to show you, to be not a disciplinarian, but to show you the right way when you're around his child,
Correct.
kind of adopt a kind of mentor relationship.
Yes.
That's got to be super important.
It is, and it's important because that is super important to have a male figure within your life as you're growing up, and even within the form of mentorship, or even also maybe understanding how to navigate those men who come inside the home and develop a relationship with your mom as a stepdad. How do you navigate that? Because also there's conflict there because one, I'm the man of the house, so you're coming in and trying to date my mom and all of those implications that comes with that. And secondly, you're not my real dad, so what you got to offer me, So that's very important, of having that mentor that's just there. Okay, I'm just there to help navigate you through your life. I don't need anything from you, but to help develop you better.
Well, Dr. Elzy, thank you so much for joining us and telling us about your study and all the things that you've learned from it. We really appreciate being here.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Well, we'll be back with more in just a moment.
You're home before sunrise, on top of the house, the kids, and our future. The smell of your cooking is our alarm clock. My Shiro's day is never done. So let's start saving a little more now so we can feel prepared for retirement. A free 3-minute online chat can give us the personalized tips we need so we can live our lives to the fullest. Visit aceyourretirement.org.
We're back, and joining us now is Dr. Travis Johnson, Adjunct Professor of Counseling at the University of Holy Cross. Thanks for joining us, Doctor. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. Okay, so as a mental health provider, what kind of effects and outcomes do you see as a result of not having a dad in the home?
What I've seen through my research, as well as providing clinical services, especially in the African American community, having worked in the juvenile justice system for so long, just as Dr. Elzy said earlier, just a matter of having trust and realizing that male figures in your life, whether it's in the form of a teacher or a clergy or someone of that nature, they're there to help and not to hurt. But if you haven't formulated a bond based on what you've seen within the family unit, sometimes that can create a form of mistrust that leads to areas such as school behavior problems, juvenile delinquency, just a wide range of antisocial behaviors.
In that area of mistrust, if you will, it's the very first piece of human development. A newborn child, an infant, learns to trust or mistrust with their primary caregivers, mom and dad. And if 50% of that is missing, if there isn't that opportunity to develop trust with a paternal figure, and then they go out into the world and they're starting to engage with others in their community, and they haven't developed that trust. If I can't trust my father to be there, then what makes it that I can now trust this individual who is nothing to me? And so it just compounds that mistrust that has developed from the onset.
We brought it up with Dr. Elzy that the coming and going of people in your house too. Like if your mom meets somebody, I mean, Doctor, is that something that adds another dynamic to something that's already could be, just a little shaky?
Yes, it's been my experience that if a young man is living in a single parent home and he is being given the role of pretty much the head of household, and then mom meets a gentleman and she's attempting to establish a relationship with that gentleman and he comes into that family unit, there is a certain sense of conflict because the young male who has more or less been parentified as the person who's actually carrying out duties, something as simple as putting the garbage out. And all of a sudden you have this stranger who has started dating my mom, coming in and establishing a new set of household rules. I've seen in the juvenile justice system that may lend to maybe not coming home all the time and violating curfews and not having the family unit to provide a certain sense of comfort because there's a new person who's establishing authority within that home, and therefore the young male may end up having somewhat of a conflict and never being taught how to resolve conflict in a healthy manner.
Well, and that may not even be territorial on the part of the new person in the house. They might just be doing a chore, but it can be taken differently. Maybe. Yes,
as Dr. Elsie pointed out, education is a very critical piece, and even helping the single mother to understand the dynamics of that. Bringing in a father in a role of maybe a stepfather who may have a different set of values that the young man who was living there had to establish for whatever reason, maybe continued relationships with his biological father's family, may have a certain sense of values that now a new male being included in his house may end up causing a lot of conflict, as I said.
You know, and to that point where you said where the new male, the stepfather figure, if you will, doesn't necessarily mean anything egregious by taking out the trash or implementing a limit or setting a rule, that it's just part of the dynamic shifting, that it does become territorial in a respect in that the male of the species, the testosterone levels are different. This is something that we don't talk about very much either, but hormonal levels play a factor. And boys, as they grow up, the hormones start to come in and play a part. Girls, as they grow up, hormones come in and play a part. And so when you look at this particular piece, one of the findings, or several findings, have taught us that males who grow up in a home without a father present have lower testosterone levels than those who grow up with a father present. And then you have a male figure come in, testosterone levels go up, and then you have these new hormones that weren't quite at those levels before. The rage, the anger, the aggressiveness that comes out, now you have this alpha male thing. It's something that happens in the male of the species, where it be packs of wolves or dogs or men, that you have this tension that comes. Just like when females of the species come together, their cycles kind of come together in the same household, whether it be mothers and daughters or sisters or sorority sisters. Similarly, among men, testosterone levels go up and down with the presence and without the presence of an alpha male, a father figure, a top dog. Somebody's a top dog, and then there's that competition, that territorial battling that takes place even unwittingly, just because biology starts to play a part.
Wow, yet another level of what is happening.
Right.
Wow, okay. So if we look at this as like fatherless, are we looking, can you look beyond who's missing to who's there? So what if it's like a mom and her mom, or a mom and the dad's mother comes in? Does that add a different dynamic? Does that help in a maturing young male? If you have a grandmother in the mix, or something like that?
It's been my experience that there's been lots of young males who've gone on and lived very successful lives, having been raised in a single parent home with a mother or a female figure. Dr. Elsie's study mainly focused on what happens when father is not there. So I heard earlier the question was presented, so what's the answer? And I like the response of mentorship programs and utilizing resources within the community where males who, I think I heard earlier where someone pointed out, if a friend on the block has his father in the home, and how important it may be for that male figure to provide some type of leadership or a male bonding with a kid on the block who simply doesn't have his father, whether it's to death or just divorce. I think that the divorce rate here in America plays a huge role in absent parents and fatherless homes. And what do? I think low male involvement in young men's lives definitely leads to conflict and just socialization skills, and not having a role model to understand what it is, as Dr. Salgado pointed out earlier, something as simple as being emotional, being in touch with your emotions, and understanding that mom and dad may have issues, that it's okay to argue in front of the kids, to help them to understand just how to deal with conflicts with members of your social circle. So it's a wide range, and I believe the research definitely needs to go further in just understanding what goes on and how mass incarceration rates may affect something as simple as not having a male figure in the home to provide role modeling.
You know, into all of this that we're discussing, it's important for us as Americans to really get a hold of this relatively soon, because we lead the world in fatherless homes.
That's so incredible to me. When I read that stat, I'm like, what?
Yeah, we lead the world. You know, every country has this issue of a segment of the population where there's homes without a father present, but to know that we lead the world in this, and the impact that this has on our children, on our adolescents, and then ultimately the adults in our society who have grown up without a male presence, and a father figure. And even if there isn't a biological father or a father figure in the home, to the point that has been brought up earlier, to have those mentors, those male role models out in society that are actively involved in the lives of children and adolescents who don't have a father present, to kind of fill in the gaps where possible.
You know, we've got about a minute left, but Doctor, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned these things. Do you think it's a place that we could find in high schools, or a certain, I know churches do it, and I know some high schools, a friend of mine helps, you know, in those issues or those areas at a high school. To have those programs in place, do you think, is that a good place to reach people, to reach these kids?
Yes, I'm a member of Omega Psi Phi fraternity, and we have a Project Manhood mentorship program that targets young men in the community who are being raised in single parent homes, and we target churches and schools. The resources are out there. As Dr. Elsie says, just a matter of education and bringing awareness.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us. We really appreciate it. Dr. Johnson, your advice and your expertise. Thanks again.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Dr. Roy, any tips before we go?
Well, I would say the number one tip, if you are a man who has fathered children, be a dad. Be there, be present with them, play with them, wrestle with them, have lunch with them, eat with them. Just do things with them, be in their presence. Just simply being around them, and they knowing that they're important enough, valuable enough for you to invest time, energy, and effort in them, that's going to resolve a lot of these situations that we're facing today.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Roy Salgado, and of course, we want to thank our guests today, Dr. Travis Johnson and Dr. Brunel Elsie Jr., and all of your colleagues at the University of Holy Cross for helping us. And thank you for watching and being a part of Coping Today.